Hi everyone, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and since it seems that presenting speed chess games is actually very popular on here, I thought I would jump in with a little bit of that myself. I'm going to show two games. The first one had nothing to do with me, and I'm relieved that I can say that, and I think you'll see why as we get into this game. And then I'll show it a game that I did play. So the first game was played between an international master and a grandmaster. It was a 5-minute game, and it represents very well. They didn't play the game especially well. Let's just put it that way. And it was surprising because both players had a fair amount of time, so it was really kind of shocking at times how poorly it was played. Although other points in this game, even in the end game, was played pretty well. So some ups and downs, and I think it's not so much to make fun of them, but I think some of the mistakes are instructive as well as being surprising. And the second game is completely different, so it's a nice middle game that I was able to win against an IM. Okay, so let's start this game from here. All right, white was the IM, black is the GM. And black is up a pawn, and as I said, both players had plenty of time at this point. This was not a mad, frantic scramble to avoid flagging here. This was just very strange play by both sides at different points. Okay, so in this position, well, what I want to do, actually, is this. Well, I'll go through all the moves in the game, and what I'd suggest is that you stop the recording after each move, and think what you think the player's move should do. Okay, so we'll work through it that way, and then we'll take a second pass and discuss some of the key points. Okay, so obviously it's white's move here. He's in check, and I'll go through this kind of slowly so you have time to pause without seeing the next move. Okay, King C2, Queen F5, King D3, Queen takes. We'll go faster on this one. King takes. King F7. King E5. King E7. C4. C5. G4. G5. A3. King F7. King D6. King F6. King takes C5. King E5. B4. King F4. And now we have a forcing sequence, so I'll go through these next few moves pretty quickly. King D6. E5. C5. E4. B5, E3, C6, takes, E2, C7, black queens, white queens. Queen E5 check, King C6, Queen C3 check, now again forced moves, King B7, takes, King G4, King B7, King H3, King A7, King H2, King B6, G4, and they both just push the pawns. And as black is much faster, white resigned here. Okay, pardon me. So that's how the game went. Now let's discuss the game. And we begin from this point. Okay, so the first move is really kind of shocking. King to D2 is of course what white should play. He's down a pawn, and going into a king and pawn ending down a pawn is not really generally considered to be a very good idea, and I don't think there's any exception here. So king to C2 is just a very, very strange mistake, and again, white had plenty of time at this point. So Queen F5 is absolutely right. And then King D3 was a good move. It's the best try. Okay, and here black played Queen takes E4 check. But here's the thing. Okay, we saw after takes, king f7, white plays king e5, and now this becomes a very, very difficult ending. So we'll get a feel for how difficult this endgame is in a couple of minutes. But white is fortunate to even reach this point, because here, if you think about it, you realize that white can't do anything about this queen trade yet. So the king is on d3, sure, it's covering the queen, but the white queen is still pinned. So black can play king to f7 for free. And now, after king d4, you could just trade and play king f6, or we can even maybe throw in c5 check first. And it's a lot easier for black to win this with his king being on this much better square. And again, he doesn't even have to do this. He could also just play this swap right away. So takes, and play king f6, and then follow up with c6, e5, king e6, and sooner or later white will get zugzwanged back. But let's take a look at the c5 check line. So here, okay, and now, all right, I don't think it matters ultimately what white does, but plays differently, he'll lose differently. So b3, h5, grabbing some space, and ultimately at some point white's king is going to have to move, and once it does, it's very easy. So king f4, for instance, e5 check, and then the king gets to e6. Okay, but even here, black can play king f6 and not even worry about the tempo fight. And the reason is that if king to d5, black plays king f5, and then king e4, followed by king d3 or king f3, and then dragging the pawn in. So that's a very easy win. So h3, king e6, and black is simply going to run white out of moves. Okay, if g4 to take away the f5 square, then takes here. Again, king d5, white will run out of moves first, so his king will have to go back to e6. But let's try this. So a3, and there's also king to g5. So this is a simple way to go too. And white loses quite simply. Okay, another try instead of g4 is to play a3. Okay, a5, a4, b6, and again, white's king runs out of moves here. And he loses. So the black king penetrates through either f4 or d4. Either way works. All right, going back a bit to this position, we looked at b3. White could try c4 to grab some more space and try to come out better in the tempo race than the last time. But here too it's fine for black, because after h5, this is important, taking away g4 for white, so black has the f5 square. Let's say h4, e5 is winning. Again, because of this idea. And black wins the race by lots and lots of tempi. Well, okay, not lots and lots, but one is enough. All right, so queen takes e4 is just a really, really poor move. It makes black's life much more difficult. And this ending is actually very tough for black to win. He can win it, but it's not easy. Okay, the best move here, I think, may be b5, taking away c4 from white, or at least making it not as good. Okay, so a couple of lines here. If b3, king e7, c4, let's say b4, king d4, king f6. And now one very typical idea that black has at its disposal is that if white plays king to c5, king c5, black plays king e5, and when white plays king c6, black plays king d4, and the e-pawn runs through. And in fact, let me look at this, or show you something in this line as well. One problem for white is that he can't keep control over the c5 square. So if takes, then king c5, and the white passer is stymied. And even if white plays c5 first, it really doesn't affect anything, because after e5, white can't simultaneously take the pawn on c7 and protect the pawn on c5. So he's lost there. So back here, say king e4, g5, h3, h5, c5, e5, g4, taking away the f5 square, but takes, king e6, and white's just about out of moves, and now he is out of moves. His king has to go back. The black king comes in, and it's trivial at this point. Okay, so that was b5, b3. If g4 here, then king e7, g5, c5, and once more, black will simply run white out of moves here. Okay, if he trades and plays king d4, then once again this idea wins. King d4 and the e-pawn runs down the board. If c4, then king d7. And again, sooner or later the white king has to give ground. And, okay, the problem here is, again, black can run white out of moves. a6, h3, g6 check. Can't go to f6 because e4. So king e4, king e6, h4, a5. So if it wasn't for that one extra tempo move, it would be a draw. But that's enough to win the game. Okay, so king e7 is perhaps a mistake. I don't know if it's a full question mark move, but I think playing b5 would have been good, would have been best. So after c4, well, after king e7, white plays c4, and this is a good move. It grabs some space, and the more space the white has, it's funny. White has to be very careful. He wants to have space for a few reasons. So, one is to try to constrain the black king. Another is that if there's a pawn race, of course, he wants his pawns to be further up. And a third reason is to have tempo moves in reserve. But sometimes also, if he pushes the pawns too far, they can become targets more easily. So it's a delicate balance. All right, well, here black played c5, and this might throw away the win, although it's very, very complicated. So I found a win with h5, so another space-grabbing move. And just to show some of the complications here, let's say white plays b4, b6, and now, okay, b5. So white's got lots and lots of space here, but I think black can just sneak out a win. King d7, h3, king e7, g4, takes, king this way. So you can see he's just trying to run white out of moves here. Okay, so finally white has to go back. All right, now if king e4, this is simple. We just trade and play king e6, and now black wins the g6 pawn. So king e3, king f5, and so on. So king f5, c5, king g4, king e6, king g5. And this is still actually quite interesting. Okay, and so here white has a couple of ways of proceeding. He can play a6, or he can play a takes b6. Okay, well, let's start with a takes b6. So here, g1 queen, b7, check. Here, queen e5. So we force the king in front of the pawn. King e6, king c8, and now black has only one winning move in this position. Just one. It's queen to d2. The point being, of course, that if white queens, queen to d7 is mate. If king to c7, then check, and king to d6 with mate next move, like so. And finally, if white promotes to a knight, stops the mate, but it's not good enough. And this is winning. Or even queen to g7 to go for the mate with king d6 and so on. Okay. So that is what happens on a takes b6. If a6, then queen takes. Okay, if king to b8, this loses like this. So black just lets white queen, but then grabs all the pawns. So king takes b6, king e5. Here a7 is no good because of queen g2. The queen comes back to a8 if need be, and there's no hope for white. So king b7, check. Here, king d6. Okay, white can't play a7 because of this mate in 2. And if b6, then here, and mate. Okay, so that gives some idea of just how razor thin, really, the margin of victory is for white, or for black. Actually, here's another line. So we just looked at b5. Here's another cool line. So a4, king d7, h3, A6, I think this is forced, G4, takes, and now C6, I think this is the only winning move here. King D4, King E7, King E5, B5, takes, and now the only winning move here is C takes B5. Okay, if this is simple, and the black king is going to go forward, but the fun line is, okay, C5, King D7, G5, King C6, and now A5. So this is the point. This is why black had to play C takes B5. And it's just winning for black. Okay, so as you can see, this is not trivial at all. The win for black at this point, but it was still there. At least I think so. I'm not absolutely positive, so I think C5 is a mistake. And H5 wins. Okay, so anyway, black played C5, G4, G5, A3. Here I think King F7 is a little bit cooperative. Well, it's not a little bit, it's a lot bit cooperative, but it's still probably objectively a draw with best play, although it's very complicated. So I think B6 is the toughest move. But let's go on with this. So King F7, King D6, King F6, and here white makes another very strange error. So the point of this position is that black really isn't threatening anything just yet, because if he plays E5, I mean if it's his move, if he plays E5, white plays King to D5, and the pawn drops by Zugzwang with an easy draw. So white has it in his power as well. White also has the plan of playing King takes C5 and pushing over there. So I think he can play B4. This seems to me perfectly good. So takes, and now if black does nothing, white's going to play C5, B5, C6, and promote. And so black is probably well advised to play E5, forcing the white king back here, but this is just a draw. Okay, black needs to play A6, or probably should play A6, H3, and then we have Zugzwang. And this is just a draw. So this isn't really that hard of a line to figure out. Whereas king takes C5, okay, white promotes also, but comes short. So here, B4, King F4, King D6. Okay, both guys promote. And now another very, very strange move by white. Again, with plenty of time. He had more than a minute left on his clock. And in fact, if I remember right, he even thought for a while before playing King to C6. Which just doesn't make any sense. I mean, King to D7, there's no Queen E6 or Queen F5 check. There's no way to force the trade of queens. So, okay, black is up a pawn after King takes G4, but this is far from trivial. I mean, queen endings are a real pain in the neck. And you know, it's going to take white a lot of work. I mean, this will come down to a clock scramble to be won. It's not going to be won just by simple technique. So King C6 was just an amazing blunder. And then even King to B6 was very strange too. I mean, why let black queen with check? So just kind of a peculiar game all around, at least in this ending. Although, as I said, both sides did some things correctly. So I mean, white played well after King C2. That wasn't good, but the next batch of moves he played, everything he did was quite good here. So really, no mistakes until here for white, and you know, for black, I mean, the big mistake at this phase of the game was playing Queen takes E4. I mean, there were wins after that, so we mentioned a couple of spots where he could have improved. But King F7 is a very simple technique, or at least it's a simple technique once you're aware of it. I have to admit that while I had no trouble seeing it in this game, I had a game earlier in my career, and already as a strong master, where I had overlooked a similar kind of move from my opponent in a tournament game even. So it was several moves in advance that I had missed it, but I did miss the idea. So it's one of these kind of funny moves where you just wait for the tension to be resolved, I suppose, and you simply miss that there's this way of improving your lot before resolving the tension. So White can't do anything really to improve his position. All he can do is move his king to d4 or e3, someplace where he threatens to save the queen, but at the moment he can't save it. So black's king gets to f6, white's king doesn't get to e5, and the win is way easier. So, hopefully there are some little things in here that were useful, especially, I hope, this king f7 point. I think a lot of the other points were either fairly obvious or extremely subtle. But, this one I think too. This is another point that I think is useful. Because king c5, king e5 is so likely to be good for black. I mean, it's remarkable that white is even in as good a shape as he is after this, that he can even get to a bad queen ending. So I think this idea of, once you realize that e5, king d5 is quite okay for white, that you should cast around and think, okay, well, what useful move can I make to improve my position? White is not in any rush to resolve this tension with the two kings and the e-pawn. So, like before with the queens being on the board, again, one side doesn't need to be in any rush, but can simply improve his position before committing to something serious. So that would be my emphasis here. If there's a big lesson from this game, I would say it's that. So when you've got a situation where there's this kind of mutual tension, don't be in a rush to resolve it, but see if you can improve your position first, and only resolve it when you absolutely have to, or at the best possible moment. Okay, so let me now go on to the next game that I wanted to show you. Okay, and this is, as I said, a game with an IM, just a 3-minute game, and we'll start it from this position. So I had white. And, all right, what can we say? I have more space. I have some kingside attacking prospects, obviously. But my structure is worse, definitely. If I don't find anything that I can do, sooner or later, it'll be a while, but at some point, my d-pawn will come under threat. And, in fact, there are even some tactical problems that I have with the d-pawn. So, for instance, let's say I played something like, I don't know, queen to d1. Okay, it's a silly move, but supposing I played it, he could keep taking on d4 and then play bishop to c5, winning my queen on the pin if I keep recapturing. So my center can collapse if I'm not careful, but again, his king side is a bit lonely. So my knight's over there already, my rook's on the f-file, my queen can go either to the b1, h7 diagonal and threaten mate that way, or he can go to h5. My rook on b1 could be usefully placed. So it's definitely a position that has some promise. But how would you continue with white? Well, I played queen to e4, threatening the mate, and if he plays g6, I'll swing the queen over to h4 most likely, and cause some mischief that way. So he took, which I think is right. I played bishop takes g5, and here he plays h6. Okay, so where should my bishop retreat? Well, in fact, there are two good squares for the bishop, and neither is really a retreat in the sense of going backward. So I could either go to f6, which is what I did, or take on h6. And, I don't know, probably I should play bishop takes h6, though it often comes to the same thing. And I wanted my bishop on f6. It seemed like f6 was a more active square. So I'm not even sure that I should have played bishop takes h6. I think they're both pretty close to equally good. Okay, so let's look at bishop takes h6. Of course, if he doesn't take, I'm extremely happy. Life is good. Maybe he should play knight e7, knight to g6, although the b7 pawn hangs. So it's a pretty bad position for him. Maybe rook f to b8, queen g4, g6. Maybe he could try something like that. Although then I play queen g5. Okay, then queen d8. So maybe he can at least fight a little bit. Although, okay, let me show you a variation here instead of just talking all this stuff out. So here, queen g4, g6, and now maybe queen h4. This looks strong. Aiming to play here and, of course, give mate. And queen to d8 doesn't help because of this. And then this. If he plays knight to e7, maybe this is... No, this doesn't do anything either. Because of simply queen f6, and if knight f5, rook takes f5. Okay, so that's no good. funny move. Maybe you can try king h7, because I have no really, overly potent discovered attacks here. But okay, just bishop to g5. Yeah, that's no good. Okay, so yeah, the g6 doesn't look so fantastic. f5 is clearly not fantastic. All right, so rook f to b8 he doesn't have time for. As I said, knight e7 would be nice, but then there's rook takes b7. Well, we'll see something along these lines a bit later, so I don't want to spoil the fun just yet. Although actually, well, it's a bit different. So, yeah, queen c6. Yeah, queen g4, knight g6. Maybe this might be adequate. Okay, so this might be a reason or a way that black can hold. I mean, of course, I can just take and retreat the bishop, and I'm up 2 pawns. So this is certainly not bad by any stretch. But it's not quite a 100% knockout blow. Well, we should take a look and see what happens if he grabs the bishop. So here, rook f6, and now the lines are all bad for black. And it's just a matter of which bad line does he want to choose. If rook f to b8, trying to give his king room to run to the queen side, and we just pile up. Rook over, knight to d8. We'll even help him on his way. And even here he's really stuck. For instance, here we can take this, and take this, and alright, 4 pawns for the rook plus a big attack. White's winning this. So there's a sample variation. If the king goes to c8, then queen c6 is mate next move. Also queen a6 is mate next move. So this is forced, but now queen and 4 pawns for 2 rooks, and very dangerous passed pawns. This is hopeless. Okay, so after g takes h6, rook f6, we just looked at rook f to b8. If knight e7, well, now white can win with rook takes h6, knight g6, rook takes b7. With the nasty point that if queen a5, then rook takes g6 check forces a quick mate. So queen b7 is more or less forced, and white has a very big material advantage and wins the game. So bishop takes h6 at the very least gives white 2 extra pawns. Okay, well I played bishop to f6, and alright, if g takes f6, rook f6 transposes to exactly what we just looked at. If e takes f6, this would be a mistake. Black can survive here. There's only a draw after king to h8. So I can force a repetition here like this, but I can't get anything more out of it. But since I do have rook takes f6 transposing to what we just saw, white's winning there. Another try for black might be c takes d4, trying to say, what do you have? The bishop looks nice on f6, but big deal. Well, here's one way to bust this. It's not the only way, I'm sure, but it's good enough. Rook f4, threatening rook to g4. Okay, and now what does white do? How does white finish the job at this point? It's not surprising that white should have wins here, maybe lots of wins, but finding the best one is a little bit challenging. So I think the best win here is queen to d3. What's the point of this, you ask? Well, it's this. Knight takes e5, rook g5. That'll do it. Okay, if knight g6, of course, we just take the knight. Takes, and then queen h6. Actually, better than that. I was thinking queen h6, then queen h8, and queen g7. And I think that's actually pretty good, but I think we can do even better. Not bishop. Here. Yeah, because he goes to c6. So this is actually not completely clear. I mean, we can trade queens, play bishop to e5, take, and then take on d4, and we're up a lot of pawns. So this is completely fine. I mean, it certainly wins unequivocally here, but white can do better than this. So probably the best move would be rook to f1. I mean, that's pretty obviously devastating. The threat's just to play bishop to g5 or h4 with mate next move. Okay, so that's very simple. Okay, if king to f8, queen h7. And if h takes g5, now we see the big point of queen d3. Swings over to h3. And the only way to stop the mate on h8 is with this. But now here, and mate's coming. It's a good thing that pawn's on d4, otherwise black would have queen c5 check, and then queen f8. But it's not check here, so nothing to be done about the mate. Okay, so bishop to f6. That's what I played. And we've seen that c takes d4 doesn't work, and g takes f6 doesn't work. Well, what about knight to e7? Well, white could play bishop takes e7. This is rather tame and prosaic. Extra pawn in good position. But that's really selling white's advantage way too cheaply. So I played rook takes b7 here. Queen c6. And again, I mean, I could play queen takes c6, although then I don't really have anything. The bishop retreats, let's say, and then he takes twice on d4. Or I guess I could play bishop to e7. But still, that's very, very disappointing. And I probably am losing my extra pawn sooner or later there. So, of course, I played queen to g4. Now, obviously, knight to f5 is no good. We just play rook takes f5. And if he plays g6, well, I just play rook takes e7, so that's hopeless. But he plays knight to g6, and, all right, he's still cobbling together a defense here. So my bishop is threatened, my rook is threatened, there's no mate. What do I do here? Well, queen takes g6. That's the answer. And this is a difference between this line and the bishop on h6, the bishop takes h6 line. Because after fg, rook g7, king h8, well, there's no discovery if my bishop's on h6. So this is what makes all the difference in the world here. Now, white shouldn't be too greedy. Rook takes g6 would be a terrible move because of rook takes f6. Remarkably, white still has a draw here with rook f takes f6, and black can't satisfactorily avoid the perpetual. I mean, he could play queen d7 and then give up his queen, but then white would have a winning rook ending. So this will be a draw. So of course I play rook to c7 check. He takes, I take, and I'm up 2 pawns with a winning position to boot. So the rest is easy. Okay, I played g4, sealing in his pieces. The king can't ever get to f5 now. And here my opponent resigned. So, you know, not a heavy game, but it was nice. It had some fun little attacking ideas there, and it was pretty clean. So usually in blitz games, unless the play is very, very easy, generally you screw up somewhere in the attack. You know, or black has some fantastic defensive resource that the players missed. But here black didn't have anything. So after queen e4. I don't know if it's a win by force. I mean, he didn't have to play h6, but he's worse here for sure. If he doesn't do anything, I'm going to lift the rooks. And after h6, bishop to f6 does seem to be a forced win. And as far as I'm aware, there weren't any mistakes on my part after that. So it's always pleasant when a blitz game is played cleanly. At least I feel satisfaction from that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the games. The first one was obviously not nearly as lively as this one, but it had its value too, I hope. And this one is a bit more entertaining, but I think has some instructional value too. You get to see a lot of patterns, and one of the nice things is that there are attacking motifs taking place from both sides of the board. So it's not simply focusing on the king side only, but being aware of the resources all across the board. So I mean, you can see that I'm able to use all of my pieces here. So the rook on f1 had relevance in the g takes f6 lines. The queen obviously is doing great work. The bishop is important, and the rook from b1 to b7 to g7 does its deed as well, and is crucial in the win. So again, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.